Gavin Newsom just became the Republicans' biggest nightmare. That's just not my take. That's right-wing commentator Richard Hanania said that after Gavin Newsom released his first podcast, which the first guest was Charlie Kirk, the Talking Points USA founder and notable Own the Libs troll. And, for all of these reasons, I think we just saw a massive pivot by Gavin Newsom. And also, I think he just threw his hat in the ring for 2028. Hi, I'm Colby Hall. This is your Mediaite Moment, Gavin Newsom 2028 edition. The election is 4 years from now, but, I think Newsom just revealed a strategy that the Democrats are dying for and just put him in the front, and I'll explain why. Launching a podcast is one thing, but having Charlie Kirk on as your first guest is kind of nuts. Charlie Kirk's a villain in the eyes of most on the left, and to engage with an ideological foe shows, something very, very different, something no Democrats have done. During the 2024 election, Kamala Harris, wouldn't even go on or barely went on Fox News, even though 2 in 3 cable news viewers watch Fox News. You're missing a huge audience. The thing about Gavin Newsom is he's done this before. Like, he did a great interview with Sean Hannity. And, in that interview, it was revealed that Newsom was fluent on right-wing talking points because he watches Fox News. He knows where they are. And so as a result, he was incredibly prepared. He knew the talking points better than many Fox News viewers, but he came with receipts. He came with facts and was able to push back on Hannity in a way that we've never seen before. And yet the tone was it was contentious at times, but it was mutually respectful. The two dudes got along fine. And that's precisely what Democrats need, is someone to not shy away from ideological foes, but to sort of engage. And so this conversation with Kirk on the first podcast was fascinating, right? He pointed out all the reasons why, here's a guy that can, serve as a candidate or as a leader and not take things personal, but literally have a mutually respectful conversation with someone who doesn't abide by those social contract, partisan rules in terms of rhetoric. And it totally defangs them, right? It says, okay, well, you can call me a libturd and say all these horrible things, but let's have a conversation into my face. The tone will be very different. And that's precisely what we saw from, this conversation with Kirk. More importantly than doing the podcast is what he actually said. And there were some pretty massive pivots that came out of this. Namely, Newsom sort of separated himself from, sort of Democratic doctrine and said that, yeah, he agrees. Trans athletes or individuals who were born male that have transitioned to female should not be allowed to compete with those who were born female. And that's very different from what we've heard. And truthfully, it's an issue that doesn't necessarily affect many people. Even Trump admitted that this isn't a big issue by any stretch. This is something that just affects few people. Yet, he and his followers on the right have made it an enormous wedge issue because it's killing the left, because it's just common sense. Newsom says, you know what? You're right. I agree. This is dumb, and it, again, defangs the criticism. Now, has this been promoted in a way that's sort of a dog whistle for the transphobic? Yeah, that makes sense as well. Like, this totally vilifies the trans people in a way that the left have understandably been outraged for. But again, that's taking the bait. This is where Newsom sort of says, all right, you know what? I got this one wrong. I've put later thought into this, and I'm going to shift my position on this. It takes away the wedge issue, and it, shows some evolution. Now, there was a time where being wishy-washy or waffling was a huge sort of a political liability. I think voters now kind of like the idea that someone that's going to admit a mistake and sort of show some evolution. And it wasn't just on this trans issue. He came out against the term Latinx. Latinx is a term for Hispanic people that the progressive love to say because it's kind of virtue signaling. But you know who don't love that term? The Hispanic community, because they think it's a virtue signaling term said on MSNBC by progressives who want to show that they're sensitive. Well, you know what? The Hispanic community doesn't like it. Let's call them what they want to be called. So that was an interesting thing. He also said that the BLM movement is largely a scam to drive fundraising. And the truth is BLM it's a movement that has been organized by people that try to raise money to fill their own pockets. That's been sort of reported on and proven to be largely true, even if you agree on the sort of the essence of that. And then he finally said that defunding the police was lunacy. It is. In fact, even the people that came up with the term defund the police admitted that, well, that's not really what we meant. So again, it shows that Newsom is willing to pivot and, separate himself from Democratic doctrine that has really hurt them. So pivoting on these issues, I think, puts him in kind of the forefront and separates him from candidates who were really kind of hemmed in by these wedge issues that were defined by the likes of Charlie Kirk. And, if we've learned anything with these political trends, it's that reinvention and shifting of policy is now a good thing and not something that you can be held to term. The other thing I will say that really kind of was overlooked is that's evidenced by this podcast is Newsom is taking the high road. He's not hiding from these people. He's willing to engage, not just with Charlie Kirk or Sean Hannity, but with President Trump. And this was best exemplified by the fact that during the California wildfire disaster, which was just terrible, Trump went to social media and totally vilified Newsom, really irresponsibly blamed him in the middle of an emergency. And Newsom pushed back, but he pushed back sort of lightly and said, look, we have people that are running for their lives. We are on emergency orders. The idea to make this a political issue in the middle of an emergency is deeply irresponsible. Cut it out. But when Trump actually visited LA to witness the wildfire catastrophe, and trying to paint Governor Newsom as the bad guy, guess who showed up to meet him on the tarmac? It was Gavin Newsom. He was able to put away all this sort of like kayfabe, performative, conflicty sort of name calling that Trump does so well. Put that aside and he showed up and, they broed out on the tarmac in a way that was like, wait, you guys were just dissing each other in private. But they knew that the constituents wanted to see ideological foes come together in a way that worked to help those who were affected by this terrible disaster. It was like the two popular kids from two cliques who know in high school that it's better for them to sort of publicly get along so as that makes them look more popular, but privately they'll talk about one another on social media. Nonetheless, again, it was Newsom taking the high road and saying, like, I don't care what you're saying about me on Truth Social. I don't care if you're blaming me. As long as you can give us federal aid that we need, we have to work together to help the people. Because the people that were affected by these wildfire disasters, they weren't Democrats or Republicans. They were both. And Newsom said, look, these are Californians, and my role is to help them, and it's going to help them more by being positive with federal aid. And shockingly, Trump responded. Finally, Gavin Newsom caught a lot of criticism on the right for launching his own podcast because his state's a disaster right now, and just look at California and blah, blah, blah. What are you doing your podcast for? But you know what? This allows Newsom to control his own narrative, and having a guest like Charlie Kirk shows, look, Gavin Newsom's not just going to be another person that's going to have like-minded navel-gazers within their own bubble. He looked to engage with Charlie Kirk and even asked him, what advice would you give my party right now? Now, Kirk wouldn't really do that, but Newsom complimented Kirk for the way that he sort of flooded the zone with this anti-democratic, pro-Republican rhetoric. The media is the message is the media. And so instead of relying on cable news pundits, Sean Hannity, Charlie Kirk, or even Jen Psaki or Lawrence O'Donnell on MSNBC, Gavin Newsom is media trained. He's handsome. He knows how to sort of lead a conversation, and he can create and control his own narrative. And if you need evidence that the Democrats are in desperate need of controlling their own messaging, just look at the political disaster that was the protest during Trump's recent address to a joint congressional session, when, the lasting optics from that were coordinated pink outfits and these paddles, protest paddles, that literally may as well have just said, we're lame and we have no voice and we don't know what we're doing. I mean, the only good thing that came out of that for the Democrats, I think, is those officials revealed to their constituents who is moronic and who doesn't understand how bad that looked? To be fair, Hakeem Jeffries said, don't do that, don't protest, take the high road. And these are the people that ignored that very sage advice. I mean, the Democratic Party, they desperately need a new messenger. And it sounds crazy, but Gavin Newsom's podcast with Charlie Kirk, it just put him in the front of a 2028 White House race. Yes, that's 4 years from now, but it shows someone that's willing to flout, like I said, Democratic doctrine and start a dialogue with the foes. It not only shows you're willing to think differently, but it defangs the opposition. It shows that you're not crazy. And in a cable news landscape where we never have different-minded people having a debate on policy, it's a breath of fresh air. And it's precisely exactly what the body politic needs, but especially the Democratic Party. So, I don't know, Gavin Newsom, you took a chance. I'm here to say that I think you just became the front runner of the Democratic Party. There's a lot of time to go, but this is precisely what America needs right now when we're so divided. I'm Colby Hall, founding editor of Mediaite. Please click the like and subscribe button for more videos like this.